Welcome to another Thursday night Bible study, brought to you as a ministry of SIGBC.
And we are contemplating once again a continuation of our series in what God calls each of us to be. Now, you've probably recall that of all the things that God calls us to be, we're going to be looking at 14 of them. We've already contemplated 9 now, and we're on the 9th one, and we've been on the 9th one for about 4 weeks now. The first 3 were be kind, be compassionate, and be forgiving from Ephesians 4:32. And then we looked from the book of James chapter 5 at be patient, where James said, be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm. And so, continuing from be kind, be compassionate, be forgiving, and be patient, we contemplated the importance of being understanding. And we looked at the idea that God's call is that we do unto others as we would have others to do to us. In other words, not just look at life from our own perspective, but to not judge an individual and not try to determine what they are doing as appropriate or inappropriate without first going through, or at least trying to understand what they have gone through. In other words, you've heard this saying, never judge a person until you've walked a mile in his shoes. Well, Jesus said, you who are listening, to you I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. He drops down to verse 35 of Luke chapter 6. But love your enemies. Do good to them and lend to them, even your enemies, without expecting it to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind, God is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. And so the call is that we be understanding, that we don't base our attitudes on others on their attitude toward us, but we be understanding. And then we talked about the importance of being loving, where Peter said, above all, in 1 Peter 4:8-10, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. In other words, you can overlook a lot if you are loving the way that you should be. 7th thing we looked at was be happy. And the basic admonition in 1 Thessalonians 5:16 is rejoice always. And we contemplated the fact that there are 8 Hebrew words and 7 Greek words used to express the idea of rejoicing, joy, and happiness in the Bible. Then we contemplated the importance of be prayerful. And that was, of course, continuation of 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 17, pray continually. And then today, we continue with number 9, be grateful. And of course, that's also a continuation of 1 Thessalonians 5, 16, rejoice always, 17, pray continually, 18, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus, 1 Thessalonians 5:18. And so we've been contemplating the importance of being grateful. And one of the things that we pointed out 2 weeks ago that we're going to mention once again today to refresh our minds is the reality that sometimes we don't stop to think about that for which we should be grateful. And so the first point we looked at last week was give thanks to the Lord by remembering what he has done. Several years ago, I read the story of a dog that was checked in as cargo by a passenger on a Japan Airlines flight from Tokyo, from Haneda, that is, in Tokyo. The dog escaped before being loaded onto the plane, and that actually caused the entire runway to be temporarily shut down, and it disrupted a total of 14 different flights because it was a big poodle, and it had been placed in a special basket, but when the JAL staff tried to load it onto the flight bound for Okinawa, which is where they were headed on that day, it escaped, and it ran off towards the runway at about 8:50 at night. So, in the morning, I mean. So everybody was scrambling to try to find this dog. And the commotion actually caused one of the airport's 4 runways to be closed twice for a total of about 6 minutes, delaying the departures and the landings. And fortunately, the dog was captured about 40 minutes later. But the JAL employee, it was discovered, later found out that he failed to place a net over the cage. In other words, simply overlooked one small thing, which was, there was a reason for that regulation. You put a net over the cage because if the cage door happens to pop open, the dog is still confined in that location. And so it's just one small thing, but caused all kinds of problems. Well, the same thing can be said about gratitude, I think, because even though what we choose to focus on, what we choose to think about on a daily basis may just be a small thing, it's easy to forget. And so David talked about giving thanks to the Lord because of his goodness, and the fact that that involved 6 different things. So we're going to continue. Last week we looked at the first one and then mentioned the second one. We're going to continue from the second one on, and then continue this Bible study again next Thursday night for the conclusion. But under David's contemplation of gratitude, mentioning giving thanks to the Lord by remembering what he has done, he actually mentioned 4 things. Tell of all his wonderful acts, let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice, seek his face always, and remember the wonders he has done. And it's this remember the wonders that he has done, remember with gratitude what God has already done for us, that is often lacking. The second thing we mentioned 2 weeks ago was that in verses 14 through 22, David emphasizes in his appointment of Asaph as the music leader that was leading this song. He points out that we should give thanks to the Lord by affirming his promises, his provision, and his protection in our lives. In other words, we're not just grateful, we're specifically grateful. We're grateful to God for the things that he has promised, that he fulfills. We are grateful to God for his provision, the supply. In other words, every single time we eat, we bow and say thank you for our food. Debbie and I have a tradition of when it's time to eat, we each take turns with each meal. We each take turns, one for breakfast, next one for lunch, third one for supper, next one for breakfast the next day. And we each take turns because we want to remember to thank God for his provision and also for his protection, because God gives us health. God protects the blessings that he has bestowed upon us. He protects us from harm. And so we give thanks to the Lord by affirming his promises, his provision, and his protection in our lives. And so in verse 14 through 22, he says, he is the Lord our God. His judgments are in all the earth. He remembers the covenants forever, the promise he made for 1,000 generations, the covenants made with Abraham, the oath he swore to Isaac. He confirmed it to Jacob as a decree, to Israel as an everlasting covenant. And here's the promise. To you I will give the land of Canaan, as the portion you will inherit. When they were but few in number, few indeed, and strangers in it, they wandered from nation to nation, from one kingdom to another. He allowed no one to oppress them. For their sake he rebuked kings. Do not touch my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm. So, verse 15, 16, and 17, 3 observations. He remembers the promises he made. He provides the portion of their inheritance, and he allows no one to oppress and rebuke us, and he rebukes those who try. So we should always be thankful for God's promises, for his provision, and for his protection. Which brings us to verses 23 through 26. And the third observation, and that is give thanks to the Lord by singing praise among the nations. Now, in recent years, it has become much more popular, and probably rightly so, it has become much more popular to focus on worship through music. It used to be in the 70s and the 80s and probably into the early 90s that, and for decades before that, I'm sure, but as long as I've lived, that's all I can personally attest to. It used to be that the worship service was all about the preaching. And so you sang maybe 3 songs, and you sang all 4 verses of 3 songs as a traditional practice leading up to the preaching of the word. And like I said, rightly so, but because we should be focusing on contemplating God's word so that we can understand his will, so that we can walk in his way. But the times of worship in singing began to take a place of greater importance as we not just intellectually contemplated God's truth, but we personally experienced the joy that comes from knowing God and rejoicing in him and giving thanks to him. And so many songs of praise to the Lord, and many songs expressing gratitude to God, and many songs glorifying God for who he is and what he has done have been written. And of course, David was a musician. Asaph was a musician. And so the idea would naturally come out that they would focus on giving thanks to the Lord by singing his praise, particularly among the nations. And so verse 23 through 26, they say, sing to the Lord, all the earth. Proclaim his salvation day after day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous deeds among all peoples. For great is the Lord, and most worthy of praise. He is to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord made the heavens. So we acknowledge God as creator, as provider, protector, the source of promises that he always fulfills. And so idols can't do any of that. And so we give thanks to the Lord by singing his praise among the nations. Number 4, the psalmist says, give thanks to the Lord by worshiping him for who he is and what he has done. Verses 27 through 29. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and joy are in his dwelling. Ascribe to the Lord, all you families of nations. Ascribe to the Lord the glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord glory due his name. Bring an offering and come before him. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. We ascribe to the Lord by giving thanks to him. We ascribe to the Lord the wonder of the things that he has done. One of the best ways to get the most from either children or employees or even those who are serving in the ministry is not to focus on the wrong or the mistakes that they have made, but to make sure to praise the good that they've done and to express gratitude for their contributions to the family, to the workplace, to the ministry. And praise and gratitude are very motivational. We've mentioned before that if you are a husband-wife situation, and Solomon said on more than one occasion that one of the worst experiences in life is the voice of a nagging wife. And so the reality is, if you want a husband to do that which is his responsibility in the family joyfully, then rather than nagging when it isn't done, saying thank you for when it is done becomes motivational. And the reality is, the husband's expression of gratitude to his wife for doing what maybe he might think is the obvious responsibility and duty of those whose roles have been divided into worker, provider, and caregiver in the home. But to say thank you for taking care of the kids, thank you for taking care of their education, thank you for making such wonderful meals, thank you for running the household so well. The expression of gratitude is a beautiful thing, even in everyday life. And it makes us more aware of the joy that we can experience because of what God has done for us as we express to him our gratitude for what he has done. And so we talk about the fact that, number 4, we should give thanks to the Lord by worshiping him for who he is and what he has done. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and joy are in his dwelling. Ascribe to the Lord, all you families of nations. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Bring an offering and come before him. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. We'll continue.
Thank you for listening. You can also join us in person or live on Facebook every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Japan time. This has been a ministry of Sakahogi International Grace Baptist Church.